Okay, Section 9, the cost of capital. The question is, what's the hurdle rate a company must clear to make its investors happy? Section 1, the financial hook, the CFO's dilemma. You're the newly appointed CFO of Tech Forward Incorporated. The CEO presents three major strategic initiatives, each requiring $100 million investment. Project Alpha, AI research lab promising 15% annual returns. Project Beta, manufacturing expansion with 12% projected returns. Project Gamma, international expansion targeting 9% returns. And which project should we fund? The CEO asked. We can afford two of them. Our financing training screens compare returns to cost of capital, but what exactly is Tech Forward's cost of capital? And so here's the challenge. Here's the financing. So 40% equity, stockholders demand, X amount return, 60% debt. Bonds currently yield 6%. Blended cost is X. Here's project evaluation. Alpha 15% versus cost of capital. Beta 12% versus cost of capital. And Gamma 9% versus cost of capital. Section 6 or 7 taught us how to market prices of individual securities. Now we need to determine what return Tech Forward must earn to satisfy both debt and equity investors simultaneously, or otherwise known as the weighted average cost of capital. Um, and so our learning goal is master how the weighted average cost of capital synthesizes all previous financial concepts into a unified corporate finance decision making framework. So here's a prompt we can use. And so here's our quick knowledge check. What does WACC represent? And that is the interest rate on the company's debt. Number two, why do we use after-tax cost of debt in WACC? And that is interest payments are tax deductible. Number three, when calculating WACC, which value should you use for weights? Market values of debt and equity. And then if a company's WACC is 10%, what does it mean for project evaluation? Um, Projects returning less than 10% to store value. So when we go into section 2, our concepts and formulas. The WACC principle is a company's cost of capital equals the weighted average of its debts and equity costs, reflecting the blended return requirement of all capital providers. And so our key concepts are cost of equity, return required by the shareholders, often calculated using the CAPM, cost of debt, after tax interest rate on company's debt, market value weights, proportion of total capital from each source, tax shield, interest payments, reduced taxes, lowering effective debt costs, and hurdle rate, minimum return required for positive NPV projects. Here's part two, the WACC formula. And it gives us where E equals the market value of equity, D equals market value of debt, V equals E plus D to the total form value. R sub E is cost of equity, R sub P is the pre-tax cost of debt, and T is the corporate tax rate. And so here's part three, our market value versus the book value weights. Here's the timeline for the capital structure analysis. Historical book values, balance sheet, current decisions, WACC calculation, and the future financing. Capital structure, market base, current stock price, equity market value, current bond prices, debt market value weights, true investor demands. And so market value calculation, equity value, shares outstanding times the current stock price, debt value, current market value of bonds, which may differ from the face value, and then preferred stock market value if applicable. So we go into part four, integration with previous sessions. Session 2, TVM provided discount rate mechanics. Sessions 3 and 4, equity and debt valuation method. Session 6, risk return relationship fundamentals. Session 7, CAPM for systematic cost of equity calculation. Session 8, market efficiency ensures rates reflect true cost. And then Session 9, WACC combines all the elements for corporate decision making. And so here's a timeline. So learn and value individual securities, determine company's cost of capital, and then use WACC to evaluate corporate projects. And so here's round one. Here's where we just practice basic stuff. Company has $500 million equity, so beta equals 1.2. $300 million debt, 6% yield. Risk-free rate equals 3%. Market return equals 7%. Tax rate equals 25%. And so to calculate it, here's the structure. We use all this. And then problem two. similar, and then how do weights change, and we can use AI to use this prompt to plug in our numbers and come out with something. And then round two, and then round three. Excuse me. And then a debrief discussion why might companies prefer debt over equity financing despite bankruptcy risk. We can just plug this in, and so companies might choose debt over equity financing, even though debt increases bankruptcy risk because debt has several big advantages. And we have five here. Debt is cheaper than equity. Interest is tax deductible. Owners keep control and no dilution of profits and predictable payments. And then here's our driver learning guide. Here's a case scenario for coaching, retail expansion decision, Megastore core. Here's a framework, discover, frame the corporate cost of capital. And then with AI, we plug this in. And then we use represent some map the capital cost components. Calculating all these numbers right here. So with AI, we just want to review using market values for weights. Does this correctly reflect how companies should calculate their cost of capital? And so here's implementation. So code the corporate WACC analysis. And again, so it's starting point, don't just copy paste. And so here we go through. And then validate. So you just verification. So we just want to make sure X percent or X percent cost with Y percent equity weight and Z percent debt weight. And so yeah, this is basically WACC application and financial decision making.